I'm sure there are quite a lot of questions around the floor at this stage from what we've seen. I have one question myself that I might just use to start off the discussion, and it's directed at Paul actually, and I'm just wondering what Paul. It just seemed to me that the examples that you gave, the smart cities, that the clients that you work with seem to have bottomless pits of money, perhaps, cities in the Middle East and in China. And I'm just wondering, to bring it back to the Irish context, how would you see the smart city concept coming to Dublin? I mean, you mentioned already Dublin is an organic and a historic city, and we have elements of that, and yet we're home to some of the highest, the biggest technology companies in the world. So I'm just wondering, how would you see smart city concept coming here and to the professions here at home in Dublin particularly?
Well, what I was just saying about, and sorry for being rude, it's just that we have so much in common with IBM. Way back in the day, I started my career doing the trade show booths for IBM. That's why I have my IBM sign here called Think, which is something that a lot of people don't do, unfortunately. And so now it's come, and I didn't realize that there was going to be a presentation on Triwega, come full disclosure. That was our technology that we sold to IBM back in 2011. So there's a lot of cross connection there, which I think has a lot to do with Dublin, which is that you are one of the few cities in the world that has within 50 kilometers of downtown probably the most concentrated amount of technology companies outside of Silicon Valley. And that happens because of a lot of different reasons, mostly tax reasons and everything else, right? But leverage that, right? You have so much knowledge within this city that just needs to be tapped, because then we start to see, based upon priorities of policy and of need with the inhabitants of Dublin, you'll find what that strategic plan is. You can't come in and just say, well, we're going to start over here, we're going to do a smart building, it's going to be green, and it'll be an eco district. And like I said before, a lot of eco districts are wonderful where there's one example, and they put a lot of signs up around saying, hey, we're an eco district. But what does that do to the average person? Really not a lot. What it does is it helps the real estate developer actually market themselves differently, which is why they also have these other things like LEED. What a joke. It's just a big marketing scam. I could make anything LEED platinum if you give me a chance. I'll just have to pay off a couple of people and just screw up with the paperwork. No problem. What a joke. It's not about putting plaques on the building. It's actually making a difference in people's lives, which is why I think Dublin's in a very unique position in that you have a very educated workforce here, more so than the majority of the world. You have the leverage of having amazing technology being done in labs like the Smarter Cities Lab here in Dublin, where we need to start looking at those as part of our palette. Now, do I have an exact plan about how that's supposed to happen? I'd be lying if I said I did, because I'm not here. The soul of Dublin needs to be intact first. The secondary piece of that is how to improve the quality of life beyond what we have now. And there's some great examples. I mean, that Lua system is awesome, better than most cities that I've seen, because guess what? The stops are actually in places where you want to get off, right? Step one. So I think that, me personally and for our company, we're here to learn for the first few years, talking with the RIAI, because at that point we start to learn what the vocabulary is. What's going to be very interesting, specifically for Ireland, is what is going to be the next step of what's your visual vernacular? What's that discussion as to what makes it uniquely Irish? Not just that, it has a thatched roof, That was necessary at the time. What happens when innovation from 150 years ago, like an elevator, fundamentally changed the shape of the city? What happens now when we have IoT as part of our palette? What does that do to the shape of the city? That's why I think that specifically Dublin, but Ireland as a whole, is a fantastic place to start.
I think, Jorn wants to come in on something like that.
So just want to add one thing, because I think maybe not everybody are aware of that. But Dublin is also basically the biggest open data pool existing. So maybe also as a capital city, so a huge city like you said, big city. So we're not talking about a tiny town somewhere. And it's all the data also the data from the public births, all the data from the lures, all the data that the city is collecting, that's all open, that's all available, and everybody can use it. So Dublin is already one of the biggest IoT open data sets existed. So you only need to tap into that, link it basically to the information that you have available, and then you can come up with new things where you really can basically make use of this data available.
Okay. Lewis, would you like to add to it?
Oh yeah, I'd like to add to. Can I speak 1 minute here?
Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me? I wanted to add that if you have a car and you spend 2 hours and a half in the car in this highway that goes through the west, we also have not only in Dublin but also in Galway good expertise and two or three universities there in the west. In Galway, Limerick. We also have a lot of biomedical industry, and I think Apple is building a huge data center there in Norramore in the coming years. I think Facebook probably is doing something in Athlone or in similar location, and it's not only Dublin, it's also the West.
That's okay. When people say, "Oh, you're an American," say, "No, I'm a New Yorker," so I get that.
Can I take some questions from the floor now? Any questions, maybe specifically how what we've heard today relates to us in the construction industry and where we are? If anybody has, Ralph, perhaps? Yeah.
So my question is about connecting the dots. We talk about the technology companies that we have here and the professions, all the fantastic research that's happening around the country. But there seem to be disparate activities. And I was just wondering, from your experience, how do you get the traditional professions like architects, engineers, contractors to interact with the technology companies and bring in the fantastic research that's being done in research centers like IBM and Galway and pool all that knowledge together, any ideas?
Well, I think every region of the world has the way of working. In China, it's an awesome place to do smart cities because they just say do it or they kill you. Totalitarian governments rock for technology implementation, man. So think about it. I'm just saying. And then, and we're about to get that in the U.S. It's going to be huge. I think that there are mechanisms out there, and what's nice is looking at benchmarks. I think one of them being Barcelona, where you had an entire very progressive government in place that wanted to showcase that even an old city like Barcelona could reinvent itself. And for 4 years, they did a great job up until this last election, when they didn't move fast enough. All the great ideas and all the stuff they started this wonderful standard sharing group called the City Protocol, right? And other efforts like the C40 group, led by former mayor of New York, Bloomberg, the Clinton Climate Initiative, albeit that's sort of funky now also with where they got their money. But even still, there's lots of different groups out there that were working. And Barcelona took them all in and started to move. Problem was, like I said, they didn't move fast enough. They all got voted out of office. Right? So it could be really cool to be seen as a thought leader, but how do you actually implement it? Here in Europe, by far, all of Europe are the thought leaders with smart cities. The problem is their implementation sucks. Because once the EU money dries up, the private sector is not primed to actually take the mantle and actually implement in a big way. So you got lots of great pilot projects, right? Like Amsterdam's the bicycle city. All right? Next, and there's no next. As opposed to places like China that will take the first initial big themes and try to implement it and then wind up with ghost cities. Then you have groups that have a lot of money, like the Royal family, got very lucky with that one, where they are spending $24 billion on a single building that has no market need. I mean, you don't need something like that there, maybe somewhere else, but not there, but they're doing it. So ego is a priority, all these different things. The best examples that I see going on right now are in their fundamental stages, and that's specifically what I'm seeing here with CITA, as being a very interesting example of how to bring together different focuses of building owner and different stakeholders to at least have the conversation, right? I think that what's happening in Australia is very interesting because we're talking about a non-governmental agency coming in, working with both two state governments and the federal government, along with all the different players there. And in context, it's a small country for the continent that they're on, 23.2 million people, and there's only a handful of really, really big stakeholders. So how do you start to get the conversation going? And sometimes it comes up with vision. And this comes from the government. So one thing that would be really cool is to watch the different associations here in Ireland start to petition the government, not for bin mandates, God forbid, but how about like a moonshot? Here's an example. So a year ago, November, Sheikh Mohammed, who's the leader of Dubai, said, we are going to make a bid for the Expo 2020, and we're going to showcase that we are the smartest city in the world. Right? So every single department, the transportation department, the energy department, water department, all these people went out and hired smart city experts. By the way, guys, there are none. Right? But guess what? Accenture said, okay, we'll do a smart city practice. Why? Because it make money. And they came in there and they're just selling the same crap over and over and over again. Let's have a workshop, let's do this, whatever. They spent a lot of money, and Sheikh Mohammed said, stop. This past April, he came in and said, when I meant smart city, I only meant one thing. I want to see that our government can make people happy. Today, they just announced the Ministry of Happiness. It was on CNN. I was like, well, then again, it was on CNN. That's certainly not news, so I'm not sure if it's true or not. But a Ministry of Happiness. And then what happened was, all of a sudden, everyone started relaxing and going, okay. And he had this thing. It was called 1, 3, 1,000. And 1, 3, 1,000 meant that the one thing we ought to focus on is happiness. The 3 is in 3 years, I want to see smart cities initiatives implemented, and I want 1,000 ideas from each one of the groups. Finally, a structure. 1,000, 3 years, you got to make people happy. That's a moonshot. You know, it's the same thing that we're starting to see also with Australia, where this initiative is not just to create a high-speed rail network within cities, it's to resettle the Australian settlement. No, sorry, rebalance the Australian settlement, because 23.2 million people, 80% of the people, 90% of the people live within 20 kilometers of the ocean, and they're constantly looking out. Why? Because it's freaking beautiful. Who wants to look in? You know, they got all sorts of crap in there, like, you know, three-headed monsters and sorts of, you know, rocks in the middle of the thing. Right? Who wants it? You know, I think Crocodile Dundee, right? But they're saying, no, we really have to do this because it's a national defense initiative. There's people falling off the islands of Indonesia that are looking at this huge continent that's underpopulated, and they're going, hey, that's pretty cool. So in the next 50 years, the majority of the national defense is at the northernmost part of the island, of the continent, in order to protect them from potential radical Islamic invasion. Imagine that. So they're taking a page out of North America, saying their national initiative to get everyone together and sing Kumbaya is to build over time a transcontinental railroad, like what happened in Canada and the United States, which created second and third tier cities for the first time. Not big metropolises that just have unbelievable urban sprawl like Melbourne and Sydney right now. So yeah, really interesting things that every geography has their different focus, but there is no one plan that says, well, you know, you get these guys talking, these guys talking, and you get that. That's what I'm saying. It's not recipes, and no one has all the answers, but what we do need is vision.
Lewis, I don't know if you want to answer that question about how university and research, the part that they have to play in terms of disseminating the technology that is being out to the construction industry and the professionals.
I think the best way is to implement it in the academic program and the syllabus. And there are lots of institutions here. We have some masters and postgraduate, and there is a lot of also professional training in BIM. Not only, but I think there is a lot of emphasis on the practicalities of the specific software program, and I think we need a bit of more focus on the process and on more fundamental thinking about the whole value of BIM. But I think it's just embedding it in the academic curriculum. I think it's the best way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Any more questions?
I just had one for Jorn, who mentioned that there were a few different IoT integration options looked at, him being one of them. Sorry.
Sorry, I'll repeat the question for Jorn. You mentioned that I think it was Berkeley you had worked with in terms of IBM had worked with in terms of IoT integration. BIM was one of them. What were the other integration platforms you had looked at, or could you talk about any of those?
Yes, so there are basically different initiatives that we looked at. So one thing was basically semantic models, which is basically, at least in research, and you already had that basically linked data. The problem basically is the semantic data from this study turned out. Of course, you got all these ontologies and they're already out there, but there isn't really something well defined for the built environment. BIM is basically the best well-defined model. And then we also looked into stuff like a haystack, which they kind of use for labeling the building data. The problem with this haystack is that's just text labels. So there's like a kind of little bit of structure, but there's no context behind it. And the context, that's what you need. And that's why that's where BIM excels. And of course, there are developments in the IT world. We always try to standardize the semantic models behind IoT. But the problem there still is they only looking at the sensors, they're only looking at the devices. They don't look beyond that into the context. And from my experience, it's the context that's very important.
Thank you very much. No, that's a key takeaway for me because the context is where the value is. So, why wait a decade to discover, oops, we looked at the wrong one. So thank you.
Another question just behind, Sarah.
So, Paul Sexton, just one question about big data. China apparently has launched a social credit program last year to rate the trustworthiness of their citizens. I wonder what the panel think about that, and how do you ensure that the big data is used for the happiness of everybody rather than an elite group?
Wow, okay. Thank you very much. Good night. When I saw that, I'm just like, okay, so, George Orwell is still alive and well, isn't he? We actually don't like to call it big data anymore because, like that's so 2015, right? And the idea of big data, this industry, we are big data. We always have been. I mean, the sheer amount of work that goes into putting up a simple building is just remarkable, right? Paperwork, workflows, construction documentation, moving into facility management, my goodness. We call it infinite data. That we have a spring well now with sensors and IoT data that's going to dwarf anything that your teenage daughter does posting up on Facebook. This vast amount of tsunami is coming, and I thought that the other panelists up here did a very good job of dissecting and saying, whoa, we have this stuff coming. I especially like the graph with the sensor growth, like in only a few years, about what we're trying to work with. When we have that type of thing of crediting people for being good citizens, you start crossing a line big time. Because, at best, you're going to get false data, because any 15-year-old knows how to crack into any government system. I mean, geez, my 5-year-old could probably do it. So you want to manipulate what your scores are? Easy, and that's just being real, right? As it comes to what are they going to do with that, and really, if you're being a bad citizen, what are they going to do about it? Are we getting into the world of Minority Report, where all of a sudden, they're anticipating that you're going to do something bad? Man, that's just a social thing that we vote in this country, don't we? Start heads to the politicians that are going to implement this stuff and the lawmakers, and vote them the hell out of office, because that's using the technology the wrong way, and it's a double-edged sword, right? But in order to create the quote-unquote happiness factor, that's not up to legislature. That's not up to laws. What that is a market condition. We didn't know that we needed things like social media until it was exposed to us, and it was like a natural progression, because we tend to want to be, as carbon-based human beings, social. It's the essence about what we do. There's professor called Dr. Karen Stevenson. She used to teach at UCLA, the London School of Economics, and where I knew her from was from Harvard Graduate School of Design, my alma mater. And she invited me to teach one of her classes. She's a cultural anthropologist that started this entire research of creating algorithms around a graphic called a hub, a gatekeeper, and a pulse taker. That every network has someone like that. It could be a work network, it could be a golf network, it could be how work gets done network. And what she wanted to do is break down the hierarchies to find what those connections were. Gensler hired her to actually figure out that who works with who, so that when you're actually laying out like a stack of a building for commercial office space, you naturally would think that the telemarketers and the marketing group have to be together, but that particular organization worked differently, that because of personal relations, a social network, that these people needed to be broken out into different floors but working closely together. Very cool design tool based upon algorithms. That there was a twins at Harvard called the Winklevoss twins that actually took Karen's class. And they thought this was a great idea to create a social network and hired Mark Zuckerberg to actually write the code behind it that we know as Facebook. Interesting, right? So I asked Karen, are you pissed off? I mean, he's worth billions of dollars and that's like your idea? She goes, no, I'm shorting the stock. I said, why? She said, because there's 7 tenets of networking. Social is just one of them and they're missing it. So if that's a little bit of a thing, and hopefully that Facebook still builds their stuff up in the Galway area, but but it's really interesting to start to see all these things start to turn around, and to understand that data is going to form its own relationship. It has its own life. There's a book called The Social Life of Information, written by John Seeley Brown, who is the managing director of Xerox PARC, the Palo Alto Research Center, where the graphic user interface coming from and the mouse and all that stuff. And when he said that inherently data wants to be free, it will always want to be free. We are very used to putting it behind bars or putting it into a CAD document or putting it into an Excel spreadsheet, but inherently it will want to get out and do its own thing. Start to think of data like that it's an organism, because it will, over time, as Turing wrote, before he created the Enigma machine, that is just one way of doing computational work. That right now we're all about bits and bytes, but what happens when those bits and bytes actually then have a brain? And that's where I think when Elon Musk says, watch out for artificial intelligence because it will take big data and use it quicker than we know how. I mean, there's no greater use of that than IBM's use of Watson right now. So I would highly recommend, start to take a look at what Alan Turing was talking about, because we're only in phase 1 of what computerization is about. The next big phase, I think, needs architects, engineers, and contractors, because we're no longer designing the physical world, we're also designing the virtual world and the world of our minds.
Thank you. I think we'll wrap it up there, everybody. I think we've done very well. We started about 10 minutes late and we're finishing about 10 minutes